Hey everybody, welcome back to Tech and Beer. We're live again today from the Celtic Corner in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. And today we're going to be talking about an area of technology that really affects all of us, and that's retail technology. If you're like me, probably every day you go into a retail store. So we're going to be talking about some of the trends in the retail sector, some of the technologies that are available to retailers today, and how those technologies really impact the user experience inside the stores. And that kind of brings me to our guest for today. His name is Matthew Brannan. He's the CEO of Maplewave Software in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. Welcome, Matthew.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Welcome to Tech and Beer. Cheers.
Yeah, cheers.
So it's glad to have you. And we're going to be hopefully picking your brains and learning some things from you about technology in the retail sector.
Absolutely love it.
So tell me about your background. How long have you been in retail technology?
So personally, I've been involved in retail itself basically my entire professional life.
Okay.
So I came from a family of entrepreneurs who had a chain of musical instrument stores. So we had about 10 stores throughout the Atlantic provinces, so a fairly big operation. So I was involved everywhere from the supply chain and warehouse all the way through to the sales side of the business and eventually through to the management side.
Okay.
So I've got a very long storied background in retail, and then pivoted to the technology side of retail about 10 years ago. So focused on now the system side of managing, running retail, and basically all the things associated with it.
Interesting. So even in that, so during that period, you would have seen lots of changes from a technology perspective.
Oh, big time, big time. I mean, I remember shortly before we got out of the music business, that was sort of the dawn of e-commerce,
Right.
and the amount of fear and disruption that brought. What's going to happen to our brick and mortar business? Was really, really interesting. One of the things that I've learned being in this industry as long as I have is that things never happen or change as quickly as a lot of the futurists or prognosticators would have you believe.
Right.
It's usually a slower burn. It takes a longer time for certain technologies to be adopted, because ultimately, unless there's a positive impact on the customer experience, ultimately the consumers embrace that technology. It can take a while.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
So during your experience, what's been the biggest change? Has it been the e-commerce play?
Yeah, I think so. Nothing's disrupted the customer experience, I would say, more than that.
Yeah.
It's been really interesting because, in my opinion, retail itself has been massively overbuilt,
Right.
especially in North America. So a lot of the contraction that you're seeing today, yes, a lot of it's obviously due to the e-commerce pressure, but also I think a part of it is the fact that it was so massively overbuilt that now you're starting to sort of see that equilibrium and balance start to find itself.
Like a normalization of the market kind of thing.
Exactly.
That makes sense. Yeah. That's I never thought about it like that, but it
Yeah.
definitely makes sense. And when you talk about trends and news items that we see with e-commerce and retail, obviously the big one is Amazon buying Whole Foods recently.
Right.
And then in kind of response to that, Walmart partnering with Google. What do you think of those kind of positionings of those big companies doing that?
I think it's a natural evolution in the space. I always look at things in terms of pendulums, and if you talk to people 5 years ago, e-commerce was eventually going to wipe out all of retail.
Right.
Of course, that's never going to happen. So what you see is the big players in e-commerce like Amazon investing now into the brick and mortar side, which really gives them total control over the customer experience. And I think you'll see more of that from Amazon, investing in more brick and mortar type entities.
Yeah.
And it's not surprising that Walmart responded. And I think really what it's about is consumer choice. To create the best customer experience, I don't think you can be firmly entrenched in one camp or the other. I think you need to be able to give the consumer the choice to interact and transact with your business whatever way they want to, in the most efficient, frictionless way that they possibly can.
That makes sense, and really, I guess in a sense, the retail giants like Walmart and those kind of companies, they look at what's happening to some of those today.
Yeah.
So if they don't adopt the new technologies and partner with those big organizations, then there's that fear there that you mentioned before, that maybe they'll get caught napping and turn into the next Toys R Us or
absolutely.
Or, giant like that.
Every industry is open for disruption.
Yeah.
So you can see it happening everywhere. You see especially in things like the Uber type companies, Airbnb, and it's gonna continue to happen. So especially the larger, more established retailers, you can just see it. The market is saying which ones have adapted and which ones have not. I mean, you're seeing them close up shop regularly. Some of them are shocking to me. Like Sears for me is a shocking one.
Right.
Sears was the original Amazon.
Yeah.
They originally, with the robot catalog, that was the analog version of Amazon. So they already understood the business model, and somehow didn't quite make the leap or the connection.
And even till the very end, it seemed like their board or whoever was in charge didn't make the connection of what they had to do.
Yeah.
And they could have done it.
They could have.
There was no reason. It was just a poor decision making.
They absolutely could have.
Yeah.
And Toys R Us is another one for me where the thing about Toys R Us that was great when you were a kid is there was no online, shopping.
Right.
So when you walked into a Toys R Us, it was like floor to ceiling of toys.
Yeah.
Everywhere. And what an awe-inspiring, wonderful experience for a kid. But they can get that kind of online now. And what I found with Toys R Us is you'd walk in and it was just not a very compelling, not a very interactive experience. And I felt that if they were going to compete with the e-commerce side of the world, well, invest in the experience. Make it a destination place again. Make it a reason for kids to want to be able to go. Maybe more things where they can interact and play with the toys and that kind of thing. I think that's one of the big leaps that a lot of retailers need to make now is give people a reason to go and shop. And quite often you're seeing the opposite. They're pulling back on staff. They're pulling back on customer service. You go into some of the big box like sports places. They got 20,000 square feet and 2 or 3 people working there.
Yeah.
Now I get why they do it because it's reducing cost, but it's a bit of a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out over the next sort of 5 to 10 years, whether we see a return to more of an investment in customer service and in-store experience.
It's interesting you mentioned the experience because I remember, I don't know, it must have been 25 years ago now when in the UK they were starting to really build out these big giant supermarkets.
Yeah.
And I looked at one and it was like, this is just a warehouse.
Yeah.
Just a big warehouse. From an experience perspective, there's not a lot to it from me as a customer going in and I'm just walking around a warehouse.
Yeah.
And so if you think of Toys R Us, what you just said, and what it felt like as a kid to walk into a Toys R Us, there could be so many experiences there that a kid would just love, right? That
Absolutely.
The online world couldn't compete if they did it right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And what you're seeing from a lot of retailers is, they will have their big flagship stores in the major urban centers where they're trialing a lot of the new technologies and really giving it that, kind of amazing reason to go. Here's all the different ways you can interact with our products, our services, and that kind of thing. The interesting question becomes, is it scalable? So Amazon Go is a great example. I mean, what a wonderful thought experiment. Really, really neat experience. Great idea. But
so if anybody watching that doesn't know what Amazon Go is, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. So Amazon Go is a project that Amazon did to basically create, for lack of a better term, a convenience store that you can walk in as an Amazon customer and walk out with your products without ever having to pay or do a traditional transaction.
I love that idea.
Yeah, so you just go in, you pick up what you need, and you walk out, and it really is a brilliant idea. But under the hood of what it took to get that off the ground is staggering. It took them years of development, a company with limitless resources. You walk in, the entire roof is basically, ceiling is covered with cameras.
Right.
So you're talking about this massive, multi-million dollar investment in order to sell water and sandwiches.
Yeah.
Right. So at this point, it's not a scalable enterprise, but it certainly sort of puts a stake in the ground as far as what is possible. And now you're going to see companies out there, technology providers, finding ways to take that model and make it scalable. I just think it's going to take some time before that becomes kind of a reality.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So obviously we've talked a little bit there about some of the big companies. What kind of technologies are there available for the smaller kind of regional retailers or one-store retailers?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing that's happening in the industry is that for smaller retailers, sort of back in the day, it was very difficult for them to get a retail system that was kind of robust, that could manage a lot of their business, and was from a reputable enough or big enough provider that it would be able to stay with kind of the current trends.
Right.
So now you're seeing companies like Shopify kind of democratize retail systems, so that you can have everything from that in-store experience to that e-commerce experience, and it's all integrated. It's something that's completely, from a customer perspective, fairly frictionless as to whether I want to go shop in-store
Right.
or whether I want to look at what your e-tail suite has to offer. So that's one big thing that I've seen that's very different from, say, what was available 10 years ago.
Right. And Shopify, again, another kind of great Canadian company,
Yeah.
success story that based in Ottawa, I believe.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and growing fast. What a great story to have that kind of company, relatively local.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, it's really, really fantastic what they're doing. You know, they're kind of, in some ways, like Salesforce was back in the day, kind of disrupting a segment of the industry. You know, completely cloud-based. So yeah, the stuff that they're doing is terrific. Like I said, the democratization, they're making this great retail platform available for kind of everybody is a really great thing. And it's a product with some, you know, they're really building the robustness of it. Where a lot of these web-based kind of download type retail systems historically are like very lightweight and kind of flimsy.
Yeah.
And if you've got a single shop, it's probably fine. But if you're starting to look into like multi-store type installations, they start to fall down pretty quick.
I worked on a project fairly recently with where a store was looking to track its employees walking around the store. That was kind of neat. It was using the wireless AP technology.
Yep.
And identifying people who, you could even identify people who walked past the store and didn't go in every day, so that they go, why aren't those people coming into our store? What do we need to do? And track kind of how they moved around the store, how long they spent in different sectors in the store. I learned a lot just being part of that project. It was kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's a technology that's starting to get a lot more legs. It's starting to get a lot more. It's starting to become a lot more useful and applicable. One of the problems we had before was, now it depends what type. There's a lot more technology now to do that as well. So when you start looking at some of the cameras that are available now to do that heat mapping work, it's really interesting. And when you start integrating that with your retail systems, there's all kinds of different things. So you have, to your point, you have your traffic outside of the store. So you can look at how much traffic is going by the store during which days, during which peak hours. What things perhaps can you do from a storefront perspective to attract more customers? So you can say, we tried this display or this customer interaction for a period of time, and we got this amount of conversion, so storefront conversion. And then we did this, and we got this much storefront conversion. So you can start to measure whether the things you're doing to attract customers in are working or not, or even your larger, more macro kind of marketing plays. But then once they're in the store, the ability to see where they go in the store, how much time do they spend where, starts to give you insights around how do you merchandise, which products do you put where, and then depending on what you're doing from a qualification perspective. So there's a lot of technologies out there now where you can qualify, have a customer. So it's kind of queuing type technology, but maybe less the static kind of interactive stuff and more. Maybe it's a tablet in a salesperson's hand. So when you start to look at why a customer's come into a store, what their needs are, then you can really start to measure conversion. So did the person leave with what they came in for? And perhaps did you expand what they came in for? So the person came in for some type of an accessory, but you ended up selling them a service or a core product as well instead. So it really starts to help you improve, your salespeople interaction, quality of sales, really start to understand your customer better as well.
So is that the space that MapleWave plays in? Tell me about what MapleWave and you guys are doing over there.
Yeah, so MapleWave at our core is a retail transformation organization. So we do that through a combination of both technology and services.
Okay.
So on the technology side of our business, our core business is everything involved with a customer's greet-to-pay experience across basically all channels. So we support everything from your standard kind of in-store interaction to self-care type interactions to online supporting the e-commerce experience as well. And within that, you're looking at, you know, your sort of standard kind of POS type transactions. But we also do all the supply chain, inventory, logistics. We have, for example, most of our clients have contracts, so we work mostly with telcos and carriers. Okay. So we have a digital contract product as well. So everything that involves, you know, taking friction out of that experience between a consumer and a telco is kind of where we're focused. So what we refer to it as is like the presentation layer. So telcos have all these back-end systems and all these different things that have to be kind of orchestrated and managed in order to facilitate consumers' interaction with them. We just bring that into a single interface, something that's simple, easy to use from a consumer perspective. Whether I'm transacting online or in store, everything looks and feels the same way. Right. So that's kind of where we focus ourselves mostly. Yeah. And we're fairly focused on the telco space. So we don't have a lot of deviation into other verticals. There's a lot of unique challenges on the telco side, which is why we focus there.
Well, it's certainly it's good to specialize, because then you can get really good at
yeah.
you know, one particular set of problems and one particular set of industry's challenges. So that's awesome. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the nice thing about telco is that with all the disruption happening in retail today, they're one of the industries that's been more insulated from a lot of the sort of the typical kind of e-commerce pressure that you're seeing from more standard retailers. So the ones that can be disrupted by Amazon are clearly being disrupted by Amazon. Yeah. Telcos, it's a bit trickier because they have a massive amount of network infrastructure. People still really are passionate about their devices. I mean, it's not just a thing. You know, people want to go in and touch it and feel it. So in some ways, telco's been largely insulated from a lot of the sort of standard retail disruption.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, it's I don't know about you, but probably half of my day, my device is in my hand, right? So,
absolutely.
So if you're going to have it that much contact with it, you want to go in and touch and feel it and try a couple. How big's the screen? Do I like it? And
definitely.
So that makes sense.
And one of the other things we learned is that, you know, we do a lot of business in emerging markets. So we're deployed in probably between 40 and 50 different countries around the world right now.
Wow.
And what we've learned is that telcos are in some ways very insulated from economic fluctuations. Okay. Basically what it comes down to is that the two things that are most important to people is, you know, I got to eat,
right,
and I got to pay my phone bill. So it seems
it's an interesting priority.
It really is interesting. So we've noticed that you know, from an economic perspective, that industry's, you know, it's under constant pressure, but mostly the pressure that they're under is from each other. So it's the battles between the various competitive carriers,
lower costs,
price compression, race to the bottom. So that's where they get a lot of their sort of, you know, pressures economically, less from the overall market.
So how big is your kind of R&D team here that's kind of researching the challenges? And
yeah, so as an organization, we're just north of 100 people. Most of our company is here in Halifax, but we have a office in Johannesburg as well, and we have some resources in the UK. Our R&D team is based here in Halifax, which is about I'd say about 30% of our entity here. So when you look at everything from, you know, developers to product managers, BAs, QA, the whole kind of team that's involved with that. Plus, we have a very strong link between our product team and our sales organization. So, you know, product's always involved in being out talking to customers, prospects, assessing what the needs in the marketplace are. We do a ton of prototyping. So when we're looking at bringing a new product or exploring whether to bring a new product to market, we have both customer and non-customer user groups that will interact with prototypes that we build to get a feel for, you know, whether we're on the right track. Is this going to remove friction from the customer experience? Does this bring value? Before we actually start to, you know, write code and make some big investments.
That's interesting. And then do you have kind of partner locations that you work with that test stuff for you and see how it goes? Or,
Absolutely. Yeah, we've got a wonderful customer in the Channel Islands called JT Jersey, and they're fantastic because they're a full quad play carrier. Okay. But they've got like 2 locations. They're very small, very agile. Yeah. So when we want to bring new things to market or explore new investments, you can go over there, talk to the whole leadership team. Yeah. They're all right there. and they have very little staff turnover there, which is very rare in this industry,
Sure.
especially on the retail side. So it gives us some, continuation and consistency on that.
I love the Channel Islands. It's yeah,
it's awesome.
beautiful spot.
Great place. Yeah, we love visiting.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And it makes sense that would be a good place to like a trial market kind of thing. Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, it's perfect. It's before we take it to some of the larger customers where scale starts to become more important. It allows us to beta things quickly and get feedback, and they like it because they're the first to market with certain things, and
Right.
get to have early feedback into viability and value of some of the things that we're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
So, when you look at retail as a whole, then, and based on what you know, what do you think are the next couple of things that we're going to see, in the reasonable future?
Right. So sometimes I'm less exciting on this topic because as much as I love to be able to get up and be a futurist and talk about all the great things that are coming,
I think that's crazy. I see people that give themselves that title, and I think futurist.
Yeah,
you're in the wrong business.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, no, it's really funny because it's really exciting. It's easy to get excited with a lot of the new technology that's coming out now. How effectively and how quickly there's uptake on it is a completely different matter.
Yeah.
I think the biggest the trends that you're going to continue to see and the investments you're going to continue to see is that harmonization between all the different channels. You can still go into really big, even successful retailers and see that their different channels are still very siloed. They might have a corporate channel with corporate stores. They might have a dealer channel where they have privately run stores.
Right.
They might have an e-commerce channel. They've got their self-care. They've got their call center. They've got their B2B channel. All these different areas, and quite often they're all very, very siloed. So from a customer experience standpoint, I can do business in one channel, then go to a different channel, and this channel has no idea who I am, or they don't have my experience. So from a consumer perspective, it's incredibly frustrating. The amount of times, regardless of the vertical, when I've called a customer support and they've maybe had to pivot me to another part of the company in order to help me, it's very, very frustrating. So a lot of the retailers are making big investments, replacing legacy systems, and getting to a point where they truly get that 360-degree view of the customer.
Yeah.
And from, buzzwordy, but from an omni-channel perspective, which really just means that as a consumer, wherever I do business with you, it looks and feels the same.
Right.
Is the other area. So from a practical kind of pragmatic standpoint, that's where I see a lot of the continued investment. And of course, as we talked earlier, the convergence between the e-commerce and the retail world, continuously trying to find that sort of balance and sort of equilibrium between those two areas. I think, like I said, I think you'll think Amazon do more investments into brick and mortar. I think you'll see some of the brick and mortar players do more investment on the e-com side.
Makes sense, yeah. And the other thing that I'd heard about coming out kind of as a focus this year was the chatbots for even existing e-commerce retail stores being a focus for them, because chatbot technology is available now. But that's interesting that you talk about taking down the walls and the silos and as a consumer, that's what I want. I want to be able to go to vendor A and they know who I am, and if I deal with them in different roles in my life, it all makes sense.
And that's just it. It's about something that consumers are great. Consumers will be very clear about what they like and what they don't like.
Yeah.
And that is something that they absolutely want. Then you take a different type of technology. 5 years ago, it was all about beacons. Beacons are going to be everywhere.
Right.
Now beacons have found their niches in certain areas, like places like airports. They're really effective. Certain retailers have done well with them, but it's a complicated technology because beacons, first of all, are not standardized. So they operate. Some are Wi-Fi, some are Bluetooth.
Yeah.
They require a consumer to have those features on their phone turned on. In order to derive any value through it, they have to actually know who you are. So you need the app.
Right.
So when you start looking at scale, I mean, how many different retail apps are you going to have on your phone to support? So while beacon technology has so much potential and promise, in practical terms, when it actually came to applying it and delivering value to consumers, it's been a really tough road.
Yeah.
And as we know, whether you use Facebook or some of these other online, being bombarded with ads about what they think you want is incredibly frustrating.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't know how great it will be from a consumer experience to walk into a store and be bombarded with offers when we're getting, you know, completely spammed with it in a lot of the technologies that we're using on a day-to-day basis.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I think it's going to be a topic that we're going to see you know, a lot more news about because
Yes.
it affects so many people so pervasively. But I think you're right that the change will probably be slower than a lot of people predict.
Yeah. I do think the other area that will get continued investment is on the payment side. You know, we're a little bit behind in Canada, for example, on, you know, paying with our phones. So I think that's another area, like market-wise, where we'll start to see more uptake and, you know, being able to transact, get in and out of stores more quickly. You know, that's another place where there's consumer benefit.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So before we go,
Yeah.
so thanks for that. It's very, very interesting. Before we go, we've got to talk about the beer a little bit.
Absolutely.
So when she told us what this was, she said it was a Californian-style lager.
Yeah.
Now, what's a Californian style? I've never had one before, but it's a local beer made by a company called Propeller, who they were kind of a microbrew before microbrews were cool. Right?
Yeah. They've
Really?
been around for a long time. Yeah.
But what do you think?
You know, I think it's really nice. It's got a very refreshing flavor. It's got some kind of almost like kind of citrusy type of notes on it.
And it's a little kind of darker and almost heavier than a typical lager that you would buy. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But it's delicious.
It is very tasty.
I could have a couple more of these.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, cheers, Matt.
Cheers.
Thanks for coming on the show, and hope to
Thanks for
speak to
having
you
me.
again soon.
Super fun.
Thanks for another episode of Tech and Beer, guys.